First, I would like to introduce Monsieur Pierre Moreau, President and CEO of the QFTC. Mais tout d'abord, je tiens à vous présenter Monsieur Pierre Moreau, Président Directeur Général du BCTQ.
Welcome everyone to this first VFX-AI Symposium. Over the past 3 years, Montreal has become a worldwide hub for artificial intelligence. In this context, it became obvious to ask the question of how these new technologies would impact digital image creation, specifically in the context of visual effects and animation. Artificial intelligence is still a relatively new field with what seems like endless possibilities, and yet its concrete application can be hard to conceptualize precisely in terms of its implementation to our ecosystem and the resulting impacts. This is why the symposium was created to allow everyone to better understand and evaluate the impact of artificial intelligence on our industry, in particular when it comes to our workforce, to our talent. Our objective is above all to offer a space for discussion and deployment of a common strategies, so companies, training institutions, and all VFX and animation professionals in general can anticipate and adapt. This event is an opportunity to review our skills and workforce needs, training curricula, and career orientations due to the arrival of AI in the creation of visual effects and animation. It is also a chance to reflect together on how we can optimize between businesses and the research and training sector to foster the growth of our industry, especially in the context of the pandemic, foreseeing our economic recovery. This first edition of the VFX-AI Symposium is presented by the Quebec Film and Television Council and produced by Calico Productions, whom we thank warmly for their enthusiasm and commitment throughout the project. Our many thanks to the Conseil Emploi Métropole for their financial support, to our partner, l'École des Arts Numériques de l'Animation et du Design, and to our dialogue driver partners, Montréal International and Synthèse pour l'Image Québec. I would also like to thank both our steering and programming committees for their vital support in the organization of this event. Lastly, a warm thank you to all our panelists, speakers, and moderators who have agreed to join us today to share their knowledge and expertise with all of us. In the end, a report will be produced based on today's conversation, which we will share with our partners, training institutions, and studio members. We hope that at the end of the symposium, many of you will leave with their heads full of ideas, tools, and knowledge that you can put to good use in the future. Have a great symposium. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Monsieur Moreau. Grand merci pour l'introduction. I'm Mathieu Mazerolle. I'm the Director of Product for New Technology at Foundry, and I'm delighted to be moderating this panel with extremely distinguished panelists to discuss the impact of machine learning not only on our industry, but also how we can move forward to nurture it and bring the advances in machine learning and in coordination with our workforce. So it's a great pleasure for me personally to be moderating this panel. I've been very close to the visual effects industry in Montreal for a long time, having started a business here and worked in multiple excellent companies with roots in the Montreal visual effects space, going all the way back to Discrete and many other companies who have roots here. And I've worked with some of these panelists, and some of them are new folks who I hope to work with more in the future. And I think a good start would be for each of you to please give yourselves a brief introduction and talk a little bit about your business, and then we can get into some of the questions. How about we start with you, Sarah?
Thanks, Mathieu. My name is Sarah Watling. I'm the CEO of JALI Research Inc., based in Toronto, Ontario. We create middleware to assist and enable animators in the fields of video game development and production, animation of all kinds that basically employ 3D characters to drive performance. That can also be applied to digital humans and their various applications. And as a company, we tend to focus quite heavily on the concept of performance, on expression, on the ability to model these things and then optimize them for usability and workflow for animation teams right now and going forward.
Great. Paul, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and DNEG?
Great, thank you. So I'm Paul Salvini, the Global Chief Technology Officer at DNEG. And DNEG is a large company that does a lot of work in visual effects, feature animation, and TV episodic. About 7,500 people around the world, with the studio in Montreal. And real pleasure to be here. I've been in the industry for a long time, since the 1990s, where I started at Side Effect Software and grew up there in the industry, and really pleased to be here today. Thank you.
Wonderful. And Morgan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and Roblox?
Good morning. Thank you, Mathieu. Bonjour. So I'm the chief scientist at Roblox. Roblox is based in San Mateo. I work from the Toronto area. And Roblox is a metaverse platform. So if you think of any video game as sort of a universe of different experiences and games, but it has its own story, its own mechanics, Roblox is a metaverse where there are many, many different experiences and different worlds, but when you go between them, you have the same persona, the same avatar, the same digital currency, the same friends list. And so what Roblox does is produces almost no content. We provide this interactive real-time platform that there are hundreds of millions of users, many of whom are actually under 13, who can go on and sort of safely interact and have these experiences, some of which are game-like, some of which are more social-like. And a lot of the challenges we face are simultaneously those of the game industry in terms of performance and visual effects, but also there's a whole other side of that, which is relating to the sort of digital civility. So how do we create a safe environment for children? How do we create an environment that's positive and that allows player creativity? Because since all of the content right now, there's about 1 million experiences, are all created by players, we need to make that accessible to everyone from professionals in sort of the film and games industry who want to create content on the platform, down to children who are just trying to create their own space to play with their friends. And so there's a really exciting range of challenges that match everything I'd seen in VFX and in games, but also in the social space and the tech space. So it's a really exciting place to be right now.
Excellent. Thank you. And as a parent, I especially appreciate the challenges and opportunities that Roblox has been rising up to, especially during the pandemic. So it's a great honor to have you on the panel. Doug, it's great to have you here as well. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and Digital Domain?
So my name is Doug Roble. I'm the Director of Software R&D at Digital Domain. Digital Domain is a visual effects company. We've been around since the early 1990s and have worked on a lot of films. Over the last, it's almost 15 years now, we've made a concerted effort to develop digital characters that the audience accepts as real. And that has led us on a very interesting path. Especially with the convergence of really fast GPUs and the machine learning technology that has been developed over the last decade. We've started applying a lot of that technology to driving these characters, whether it's for film or for live performance. And so that has led me particularly on a very interesting path where I have gotten a digital character that looks like me created, and I've used it to give various performances. And then over the last year and a half, we've been just grabbing everything, all the technology that we possibly could, and throwing at it, trying to create an autonomous version of me so that I never have to do things like this again. I'll just send the digital character. It's been crazy. And it's also taught me a lot about the words AI versus machine learning, and how machine learning exists, but AI does not. And so it's been fun. It's been a great time.
Excellent. What a great way to start off the panel. And I'll leave it as a challenge for the audience to determine whether this is actually digital Doug or the real Doug, and everyone can make their determination at the end. So the panel will be a bit of a Turing test. So I guess the first question is, some of you in your introduction, you spoke a little bit about the challenges that you're trying to rise up to in your work around in how you're bringing machine learning to bear. I guess one way of looking at the question is, what kind of expectations do you feel are outside expectations are being applied that you feel machine learning is the right tool? Like where does the application of machine learning kind of meet the either the consumer or user expectations that you're seeing in the field right now? I guess let's throw it to Sarah, because I'm quite interested by the work JALI is doing. Maybe you can start us off.
That's great. We actually have internally, an ongoing tension between the concepts of craft and artificial intelligence or AI or even machine learning, and where and when to apply it, and how concepts of human questioning, modeling, that kind of thing can be first deployed to create the kind of data frameworks or question frameworks that then machine learning then we would then apply to optimize. So when we were building the language libraries for the multilingual capacity for Cyberpunk which released last fall, and that was our first big commercial opportunity, and to which I think was quite successfully received. One of the big projects that we had to do was enable them to release this game in the 10 languages that it was released in, not just in terms of dubbing, but having actual animation that was reanimated for each language. Language models, we were trained by various models, and we had to do a number of different experiments. And what we had found was that even though we had these robust data sets of spoken and audio language, there were certain things that were very specific, both to context and to each language, that actually we had to go in and write these things ourselves. And they would come up in things about the way that you would pronounce, say, ST in the Slavic language versus the English language. And they're very different, and they come out only in certain words, not all words. So it was very, very hard to generalize. And that was where we found that we were always sort of sitting at this interesting intersection of hand-authored models and AI models. And we tend to err on the side of human intervention and wanting to ensure that there's a place always for ourselves as researchers, as developers, as artists, the ability to sort of be at the center of asking the initial question that we then task machine learning to go provide a robust way to recreate it and replicate it and improve its return to the user. So I don't know if I've answered your question directly, but that's sort of what I think is very interesting about is being able to meet speed and accuracy, but also be able to meet expectations of context in player specific or content specific environments.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thought. Obviously, Cyberpunk really raised the bar around people's expectations of the kind of living, breathing world, but we often forget about the element of artistic control being really important.
Yeah, I would say that when we were first tasked with that, it was lower on our internally that we didn't see it as having the impact that it was going to have. But when we saw the release of games in these languages, the responses on Twitter and all of these different threads from people who are playing in these languages said they would never have before bought it in that language, never. But now, because it was, you used in the old, back before, you would have to stretch the animation over a different time frame. And it was just disjointed. One person said, I would never play it in Russian. Why would I bother? I would just play it in English because the animation's better. Well, this made it very different. So it was awesome to have that kind of impact.
Amazing. Another area as well, there's obviously consumer expectations around what machine learning is starting to be able to deliver. But I'm also quite curious about how machine learning and AI are disrupting existing, business or software development processes. Paul, I know DNEG is quite has been a kind of an early adopter of using machine learning technology in internal processes. Maybe you can elaborate a bit about that, and especially, what do you find has kind of disrupted the way DNEG operates, and where has that kind of yielded fruit, and where has it been challenging?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think in general, we're on a mission. We have an internal tagline about a better way to create better content, and it's really twofold. It's looking at the process of content creation, but it's also looking at the end result. So how do we help tell better stories? How do we make sure that we give the right amount of creative control as early as possible in the creative process, so that we can shape an artistic vision and then be able to converge on that fairly quickly. And everything that we're doing at DNEG in terms of our technology is about increasing that collaborative experience with our clients. It's about taking away what was once a very linear post-production process and making it a much more collaborative workspace where people can really work in the digital world the way they might have on set. And AI is one of those tools that we have at our disposal to allow certain things to be automated. I think the challenge for us, and the challenge at the high end of film and visual effects, is precisely what Sarah spoke about, and certainly what Doug will speak about, which is the need for us to not only have something that's incredibly seamless and transparent ultimately to the audience and just fits into the story, but it's one where controllability is essential, directability is essential, that we're really talking about very carefully directed sequences, whether it's a human performance or even a computer simulation. It'd be really easy in our world if we could hand it off and say physically accurate explosions and things like that. Yeah, that's what we're looking for. But that's never the case. They always want a piece of a car to fall in a certain way or miss a character by inches. And it's that kind of environment that we have to create, one that allows complete directability, but ultimately to the end user is fully seamless. And so for us, AI and machine learning tools, they're enablers. They're different ways of allowing us to automate certain things we'll talk about later that helps us to do that job really, really efficiently.
Yeah, that's really great, and I think everybody was nodding their heads violently, as we're all in this industry to enable creativity, and kind of applying machine learning as a force multiplier for creative minds is really the key, the key aspect to master. I'm quite curious about how this applies in the environment of Roblox. Morgan, maybe one question is how do you see the machine learning being applied to the, because in the case of Roblox, obviously your creators are, millions of kids around the world, and unleashing their creative potential is a massive undertaking. But I'm also curious as well, how do you match talent for folks coming in with, machine learning backgrounds and kind of connect the sort of the academic side of machine learning to this mission, which is really, really about helping kids be more creative. There's, a disconnect. Obviously, when you read an academic paper about machine learning versus a mission much more kind of with a human touch to that. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about how that works at Roblox.
Yeah, it's a great question. And that force multiplier that you mentioned, I was just thinking about that a lot in terms of, we've always been, data-driven has always been the way to get this great production multiplier, right? So we had environment probes, we had mocap, we had full body scan, right? Every time we did that, we were suddenly able to take tasks which essentially could have been automated, but that were just burning a lot of lighting designer, artist, or TD time, and we could put that time somewhere else, put the human creativity back into another point in the pipeline. And I see AI as that. It's a way, and as I think Doug mentioned, there's sort of AI, and then there's machine learning, which is a less lofty goal than generalized AI. And then there's deep neural networks, which are the techniques that many of us are using, but there are plenty of other machine learning techniques outside of that are also interesting. But it's kind of a way for us to make every part of production data-driven. And this notion of accelerating the content creators, whether they're, as in our case, they're amateurs and they're the users, and part of the interactivity is content creation, or whether they're VFX industry professionals. I think it's the same problem, just at a different scale. And it's wonderful to see that this so-called AI techniques can help with that. But there's a tremendous problem both for the people using the techniques, right? So not the ones who are programmers even, or doing the data collection, but just the people who are using these tools. They're very different than traditional tools. And so finding ways to educate them about the tools, even as, I think for all of us, the tools are evolving under us as we're moving, right? But then also, how do you get talent who understands the needs of a production environment, but is sophisticated about a technology that really only in the last few years started expanding? We were fortunate to acquire Loom.ai, which was an avatar company, and they're bringing a lot of new technology for expressiveness. It's kind of, if you think of Digital Doug for video game environment, where we want players to be able to sit in front of a webcam or with their inputs on the keyboard or gamepad or phone, to be able to create a really compelling avatar performance. Whereas today, the avatars are basically action figures. You can move the arms and things, but we haven't gotten a level of expressiveness. So I think it's going to be very exciting to see how that deploys. And we also have folks like myself who came from a more academic background or a more fundamental industry research background. And we have a lot of data scientists, for example, who are very familiar with AI techniques. But I think a lot of it is going to have to be that we're all just learning and retooling the way we all have throughout our careers. Over the last 20, 30 years, essentially everything has changed in VFX production, whether it's real time or film industry. And in fact, they've completely converged. We're all using the same tools now anyway. And so I think it's not going to be so much about, we would love to hire new experts, everyone would. But I think there's a lot of old dogs that are quite capable of learning new tricks, and this is a very exciting new trick for all of us. And so educational resources and sharing at places like SIGGRAPH and DigiPro is really, I think, the way we're all going to kind of level up on the technology.
Yeah, that's great. And
actually, can I sneak in there, because I want to emphasize something with all this stuff with machine learning. Morgan was saying data-driven, and that is the huge change. And just as an example, say you wanted to rig a face. 3 years ago, when you wanted to rig a face, you built blend shapes, or however you're going to be doing it, but you build, let's say, blend shapes. You build a whole bunch of blend shapes, and then you get some riggers, and you start modeling and shape and building the face, and you go, okay, the smile isn't working that great, so I'm going to create another shape. I'll stick it in there, and I layer in all these blend shapes in order to get this cool looking face. It's all artist time. It's all that. It's all effort and skill. Now machine learning is coming around and we're going, no, that's not the way we're going to do it. What we're going to do is put somebody in front of a scanner. We're going to capture a ton of data, and then we're going to train a system that's going to figure out how the face moves. And it's a totally different way of working. And it's really tricky to debug. It's, back in the day when you wanted to fix a smile, well, you just fix the smile. And now you're like, well, did we capture enough data of when he was looking to the left and making a smile so that it actually can learn what his face looks like in a smile? And so there's all these different skills that are coming into play. It's like looking at what you've got and how to use it to train a system that will learn how to do what you want it to do. And then I really agree with Morgan. It's a totally different skill set. And we're certainly at Digital Domain, I'm sure across the board, we are conducting training classes. Heck, even our software developers, the people in our group, we're all computer graphics people. And over the last 5 or 6 years, well, more of the decade, we have been getting them up to speed on a lot of these techniques. And so it's the software developers are then pushing it down to the artists, and they're seeing the power of this. It's very cool because you can do things and get the subtleties that you just couldn't get before. But it's a brand new way of working. It's weird.
Yeah, I really appreciate you jumping in there, Doug. I was going to ask, like, what are some of the learnings, the things, DD obviously being in many ways on the leading edge of some of the applications for machine learning around creating digital characters. I mean, that's Foundry as well. We've been working in the machine learning space, and that's one thing we've learned as well, is that the way that artists have to think about what they're creating, it's almost like they're not driving the rally car by themselves anymore. There's a co-pilot now, and they have to learn to play off of one another. And it's not like the old school, well, here's some code and figure out how to just, build together like Lego bricks. You really have multiple hands kind of building a thing, and one of those sets of hands is digital. I find that very fascinating, and I think we don't quite know what the limits are of that. One question I have, and I'll make this like a wild card thing, so anybody who wants to grab it can, because it's a bit of a controversial question. But if AI truly is a force multiplier, does it create unfair advantages? Will we see a world where the people who are either the companies or productions or folks who master it will have will create a rift between, folks who are doing things the traditional way? What are the implications of that? Is that a good thing? How do you see the disruptive effect of machine learning, and how it will cause, have an impact on our expectations between the people who are mastering it and the people who haven't? So anybody who wants to grab that hot potato, go for it.
I'll jump in, actually. I think there's you could answer this in twofold. One, in terms of internal process and how you're sort of structuring your teams to work with these kinds of technologies. One of the things that I was hearing and I wanted to emphasize was that the concept of generality, like things like core competencies and deep focus are obviously it's not like they're not important. They will continue to be incredibly important. However, what I'm seeing on lots of teams, including in our own, is that really, really fruitful work comes from introduction of broader experiences, things like understandings from craft versus machine learning from computer science departments and graphics. They're all working together, and the workflows that are being introduced into these workplaces are enabling that kind of collaboration in a much more fluid way. And I would say that, like all of these kind of technical, so then externally, for all of these technical developments and innovations that are being introduced, there's always going to be, I think, a bit of a learning curve where things are very computationally big, and so they're still expensive. So access to them sort of remains for a while the province of larger studios and that kind of thing. But then as the workflows start to be replicated across, things like, say, Unreal, for example, the engine itself, that's really one of the big industry disruptors that has enabled a lot of people to make, say, AAA quality games with 2-3 developers. That was never the case anymore. And so then that sort of springboards that studio into a completely different strata the next time they go to seek publishing money or investment in that kind of thing for their next opportunity. And then they're able to hire when that was not before a thing. And then I think you could conversely say that since we're dealing with things like art, performance, and that kind of thing, subjectivity will continue forever to be a strong influence, and people will use the mediums that best suit the story that's being told. So I don't believe that even though there's access to really expensive tools or technologies, that doesn't mean that there will be an abandonment entirely of pre-existing tools. They will just be used in a different way, used in conjunction with different tools, maybe even enabled. Like I spent a lot of time watching the team at Leica and what they're always putting out, and they're constantly adopting new methodologies for telling tremendous stories, because even though they were entirely stop motion, their real, I think, company ethos is about storytelling. So now they're mounting their first live action. It's going to be really interesting to see what they do with the tools that are available to them.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And that type of adaptability, Leica is an excellent example. But I think we're all adapting to machine learning tools and the implications. Does anyone else want to jump in and maybe talk about how this will, the effects of this are, get on board, or it'll just be there everywhere? I can't, I don't see anything in the space today that isn't already trying to put in machine learning assisted tools or already has them in terms of like artistic workflows. So it seems like we're going through a process of commoditization in kind of a way. Does anyone kind of feel like that's beginning to happen? And are we going to see different approaches in terms of how machine learning gets packaged up, and what kind of differences of approach, and what do you think the success factors will be?
Let me make a minor technical point to build on something that Sarah said, because I think it's really important. As the first big exciting results that we all saw from AI, and we saw these at festivals and conferences and going into production, were mostly around a specific set of techniques called supervised learning. And that involved the case where you had to spend a lot of time manually labeling data. So instead of having people spend a lot of time making the rig or retouching the mat, or they were spending time going in and typing in language tags on large pieces of text, or they were going through in images or things, and that really came down to whoever could afford to have that much data, just acquiring it, the time for people to work on it, and then afford the compute time to process it. Had a big advantage. And so it's definitely the case that large studios or large companies had a big advantage. And what we're seeing now is that that's really not sustainable. So we're still doing lots of supervised learning, but there's, I think, a tremendous amount of R&D work going into something called reinforcement learning and a technique called GAN, so generative adversarial networks. And these are different techniques, but they both have the same property of, let's please get people out of the loop of having to manually teach every single example. And can we somehow make AI packages that can learn from a small number of examples, or that can learn somewhat autonomously? And it's obviously much harder. And this is the forefront of the research that's going on. But I think that's going to, every advance there has a real leveling effect across the industry of, it makes it much more accessible to smaller companies or smaller production groups to incorporate AI if they don't need 1 trillion images or these giant data sets and the time spent processing them. So I think that's going to be a very long-term challenge, but that's exciting in terms of really sort of democratizing access to AI tech. And I think that's what's going to enable it to go throughout the field.
And also we are taking advantage of a really nice sort of community in the machine learning world. Right now, if you write a paper in machine learning and you publish the paper without including a GitHub account and perhaps the data that you use to create the paper so that other people can replicate what you did, you're kind of looked down on. And so this is awesome. It is really good. And talking about democratization, you can go and see what somebody did and is it magical, or is it just, oh, that only works in that one case? But also, there's a lot of data floating around, and if we get to reinforcement learning and things like that, that's great. But then there's also just taking a data set that was created for something, and a lot of these are open source, so it's great to be able to use. And then you can use these models that have already been trained on them, or you just fine tune them to your purpose. And that is lovely. That is this sort of community of machine learning, and just trying to say, hey, I tried this and it worked, and you try it now. That's lovely. I don't know how long this is going to last. And it's a little bit different than in computer graphics. In computer graphics, there was a lot of sharing of ideas, but there wasn't a lot of sharing of the code of the ideas. And right now, the machine learning community is really, really open, and it's awesome. It's lovely.
Paul, I'm super curious how, because in terms of like boosting production efficiency and bringing these things to bear, how have, you know, for me, almost in a way, is someone who's been focused on helping people producing content to become more efficient, more powerful. There's you know, my wild imagination is that an AI will somehow like assist the abstract creative process. I know we're not there yet, but it's getting close. How do you see that, you know, with these you know, unsupervised techniques potentially being part of what unlocks some of that? Where do you see that going?
Yeah, I mean, this is such an exciting time. Like, it's amazing to be part of this industry at this time. I think you even look at upstream from us at what shows are greenlit and how shows are created today. We start to see AI being used to determine precisely what content and combination of elements audiences are looking for, and be able to better predict the outcomes. That, you know, with some certainty, that's also a chance to be able to explore creative alternatives as well. So there's some really interesting things happening where something that maybe wouldn't have had a chance to succeed, a creative vision that may not have had a chance to succeed, may in fact be endorsed, validated, and then have a chance to have success. So that's exciting. And then as you get into production with the you know, various tools and techniques, I think Doug said it really, really well. There will be areas where the way we work are completely transformed. It's just, you know, a completely different way of working. But then there will be other areas where it's just about really being an enabler, an assistive device. You know, so we'd love to train some of the characters that we have in many of our films, but they just don't exist. They're being you know, they're being created from scratch. And so, you know, how do we create tools that allow you to remap the performance of one individual onto other characters that have very different you know, morphologies? And so those are the exciting challenges, I think, that will just never end, not in our careers anyway. So that's why it's such an incredible and amazing time. It'll be a combination of disruptions, you know, some businesses that will be completely transformed, some parts of the workflow that will likely be completely transformed. But, you know, other areas where, again, it's all in service of telling incredible stories. And so we'll never lose sight of that piece, that if it helps, terrific. You know, otherwise it's not going to be useful. But yeah, I think there'll be areas. Well, at companies like DNEG, we developed a ton of internal software, so a few hundred people in our R&D team. But we also rely on external vendors and the tools from those vendors. And our digital content creators are all looking at AI in their own context, through their own lens of how, in that area of production, how AI can be helpful. So we're going to benefit not only from our own investments in AI and machine learning, but also in the investments of those creating content. I think it'll also create new opportunities for new companies to emerge that are focusing on very specific applications of AI and machine learning to parts of our business. And that's exciting too, because it means new opportunities to do things in a better way. And new companies will be created for sure. well, we have one here today, so it's, you know, it's a great example. But I just love seeing the impact it's having on the industry already.
Yeah, that's wonderful. You know, the explosion of interest and creativity that's matching the applications bearing fruit is really kind of made this an interesting time. You know, we're living in a time where virtual production, cloud, and machine learning are all in this sort of state. And one of the things that I sense is absolutely key for us to benefit the most from this state is really collaboration. Obviously, there's space for competition in business, but you know, we're all figuring this stuff out, and we don't yet know what the kind of the common platforms or how we can best set boundaries to feed into each other's processes. And I feel like open source has always been a really key part of this. You know, like you rightly mentioned, Paul, we all depend on you know, almost like a supply chain or an ecosystem of like an economy of tools and people and knowledge, and open source is like a big part of that. By the way, I'll make a shameless plug for the Academy Software Foundation. If any of you are here and are considering membership for the Academy Software Foundation, please do consider it. But I think this is a really key aspect. What role do you as panelists see the open source movement and the ability to bring academic research work and just people building, you know, like Doug said, like, unless you can show that this is actually a thing, like this is really key. How do we better work with with open source projects and the open source movement in order to feed what ultimately is driving our industry and business forward? I'll just shoot that to whoever wants to go first.
So I can quickly say, yeah, absolutely. You know, full endorsement for what the Academy Software Foundation is doing. Phenomenal work in taking tools that are essential to our industry and allowing us to help shape those tools in a collaborative way. That's been phenomenal. Also go back to what Doug's saying is that this community really is incredible. The whole AI community in terms of its openness and sharing. And that's super critical in my world where, and Doug's for sure as well, where many of the techniques you see, they can produce incredible results, but the devil's always in the details of you go and then try to implement it on something else. You go, oh, that's the gotcha in the paper that I didn't see, you know, the little paragraph at the end that says areas of further development, you know, and with some time, we can make this actually work. And so that's the challenges, but what open source allows us to do and sort of the open discussions and the way data is being shared, so we can quickly get to that place of replicating what others have done and then explore the applicability of that technique in our world with our data at our scale. And that's amazing. And that's what's really going to help this take off. I think if we lived in the world of very proprietary and closed systems, we wouldn't have nearly the same optimism about the potential for AI to transform our industry.
And it's super important, actually. And there's open source of code, and then there's open source of the machine learning models that have been developed. And, you know, famously, things like GPT-3 took millions and millions of dollars to train. But it is available. You can use it. And so that's one of the daunting things with machine learning is it still takes a lot of time and a lot of compute power. So the open source aspect of this is really important. Otherwise, you look at a paper and you go, okay, great, but it's going to take 3 weeks to train, and it's going to take 2.5 weeks for us to see if it's actually working. And so that alone is this sort of, whoa, oh shoot, I was moving along and now I got to wait a long time. So if I can go to an open source thing, download the model, do a little inference, which happens in milliseconds, great. I can see where it works and where it doesn't work, and whether I should make the commitment to do the training and capture the data and do everything that I want to do in order to make it useful for me. It's the fact that we've got such a good, lively open source community right now is essential for fast development of machine learning.
That's great. And Sarah and Morgan, both of you work with folks who've kind of laid a lot of foundation around this type of work. For people kind of coming into the industry and getting into this space, like I guess one of the things I'm super curious about is like what do you look for when you're looking at not just contributions but also contributors in the machine learning space? Like what looks like what are success factors when breaking into this? Obviously, it was really easy in the old days when it was like push more pixels faster or make them look prettier. But this is a much more nebulous area. So for folks working in this space who want to help enable creatives, what should they be considering, and what forms the basis for the things that are being weaved into the efforts you're involved in?
Okay, I'll go first. One of the things, a couple of things, I think, when we're thinking about the kind of skill sets and understandings that we want to have on our teams, and I think that would be advisable to start, that are advisable in terms of instructing new generations of learners and joiners to the workforce, is again, things like generality and breadth of thinking, analytic skills that actually can only really be informed by that former element, not just sort of tunnel vision focus. It's a very rare skill to be able to read these papers and sort of then translate that into something that is functional as a something that can be used or productized. So when you're building a company, that's a huge and rare find. So when you have that, you're like, yoink. But then that ability to teach and express, to be able to disseminate information to the rest of the team about what the core principles are, that's fundamental in this paper. That is why it's interesting and why this is important versus all the other papers. Same as, trolling through Gits and that kind of thing, and looking at various examples of code in situ or code functioning in a specific example. That kind of ability to understand in principle what's happening there and how it can be applied practically, I think is really an important thing. And that kind of understanding of how systems work, not just necessarily computer systems, but also personal, like human resource or team systems work, is super important, I think, for workforces right now and going forward, is this ability to understand a wide amount of broad amount of information and different applications. I'll leave that there. Let Morgan pick that up.
Yeah, that concept that, Sarah, that you said of, research papers are written for a really specific audience, and you and I are in it, but it's easy, especially when you see the fantastic results, for people to not appreciate, a research paper is not a product. It's not a sales pitch for a specific technique.
I say that all the time.
Yeah, it's a very specific coded language between scientists for compactly expressing, years in some case of work, and translating that into a production context or into a product is a really special skill. And it's right now at Roblox, I'm hiring up a large research team, and I'm doing it very slowly and carefully because there's so many just brilliant people right now who are looking for positions and who are knowledgeable about AI. But there's the kind of people who can spend the time that it takes to really understand your production constraints and understand what the artists, what the TDs, what they do and what they're trying to achieve. So it's not just about the pixels or about the way the avatar moves, but really understanding the holistic goal of what we're trying to accomplish. So you need people who have that, not just folks who are smart and could use AI at a hedge fund maybe, but not to create entertainment. And then also you have to have this real academic research skill is really valuable right now in a way that, SIGGRAPH 1990 you needed to start using, whether there's micro polygons or, early ray tracing at that time. There are these periods in time where academia and production come really close, and it takes special folks who have the skill to go between the two and understand the constraints on both sides. And so I think we're in that place now for the next couple of years where it takes those special skills. It's not just enough to be good at deploying AI in a generic context. If you want to read the papers and you want to work on production, you're going to somehow have to know both sides and just invest a lot of effort really listening on both sides. I think the largest part of my job is 90% listening and learning, not spouting wisdom.
We're also in a very interesting place where, because of GitHub and because of the access to a lot of this stuff, everyday people can do amazing things. And I will tell you, it's a bit of a pain because you've got a show and you've got 600 shots to do. And some director comes in there and goes, well, I downloaded this code and I was able to turn my kid into a cat. Why can't you just do that? And I gotta say that you were talking about expectations. That is one of the killer ones right now is, yeah, but was your kid in this lighting condition? And so many different constraints. So there is this magic that is happening out there where everybody has sort of some really easy access to it. But in order to get it into production where it works shot after shot after shot and gives the artist control, because the director at the same time is going to go, I can turn my kid into a cat, why can't you? But then he's going to turn around and go, I don't like the way that pixel looks. And so it's interesting. Yeah.
That's, I think, a really I think back to the whole concept of expectations, I see a lot too when we're all immersed in a sort of constant soup of posts on LinkedIn and Twitter and all of our different spaces that are showing the best examples of the work and breakthroughs that we've done. But there's everybody else's in there too, and they're not really, who are not necessarily involved in the creation of these innovations and the work that goes in behind it. And so when you're in a sales setting with say a business unit that is not necessarily creative or technical, there's a huge gap that you actually have to cross in translating that this is what you're seeing there sort of repeatedly. So it seems like it's done, right? This is the bar now. And so this is what I'm buying. This is what I want. It's like, well, a lot of these are actually examples of proof of concept for whatever reason. And this is a slice of when it's perfect. And then there's a whole lot. We see tons of examples of that, like CES and different trade shows where we're all showing our best, and there's still tons to make these things, as you say, Doug and Paul, I've heard you say all kinds of times, replicable and repeatable. And I would also add practical, that we can actually give to someone to use in a way that doesn't then add however many hours to train them up or understand or teach. So that's a constant challenge, I think, in the industry from the perspective of expectation.
That's so true. I was looking at a paper the other day and a video. It was one of those two minute thesis type things where they showed turning a still image. You guys probably have all seen it, into videos, right? So from a still image into a video, it was even a partial image into a complete image, and then into an animated image, and the results were just stunning. They're absolutely. But what I loved about this was they also showed where it failed, and that was just amazing. And so it's like, oh yeah, that's the norm. That's what you normally get with these techniques. And we do have to be a little careful that when we get to see those glimpses of the shining examples where all the stars aligned and it works beautifully, that's fantastic. But I think, as everyone says, that the art of what we do, of this industry in visual effects, is about creating very specific looks. Not some look that's awesome, but a very specific directed look that tells the story the way the story needs to be told. And that's the challenge. So on the skills question, I would say this is an exciting area because, like so many other areas, you can take your knowledge of whatever it is you've specialized in and then apply it. And so much of the heavy lifting has been done by those who have written open source libraries in the past, but then the ability to apply that with a deep understanding of the various domains in which it will be applied, that's amazing. So when we see AI applied to denoising technology, you really have to understand the role of rendering and how it works, and why AI is useful in that context in order to contribute in that way. So it's exciting, but it does mean people have to take this tool set and then think about applying it in a specific area with deep domain understanding of that area.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and understanding where that the limits of these new technologies lie is really key. You know, I think about how, you know, machine learning is in our everyday lives in terms of, you know, product suggestions and Facebook feeds, and, you know, we're at a point where that's all normalized, but we're also like super frustrated by that, or they're, you know, they're swinging elections, and they're, you know, disseminating disinformation. I mean, for us as you know, people enabling content creators, there's a risk as well that we won't fully understand the limits, or we'll have to master the limits. You know, Morgan, especially, you know, when you're enabling creativity with kids, I know that's a particularly sensitive issue, right? Where people to express themselves and have this complete artistic freedom is fantastic, but there's also, like you mentioned, one of the challenges that Roblox has is how do you limit bad actors and bad behaviors? How do you find that boundary, and where do you find that limit between wanting a creative intention but also not being able to take the tools in a way that's like not intended, or gives consequences that have a negative impact?
Yeah, that's been the moderation and civility. So there's a level of it where it's when people are interacting, if someone's doing something that's inappropriate, can we intercept it before it's even seen by anybody else, right? And that's the idea, right? Can you just stop that from even happening? And then the second level is when bad things have happened, right? Whether there's, you know, content on the platform that violates the terms of service, or someone who's using inappropriate language repeatedly, then can we identify that effectively and sort of remove the problem? And both of those are cases where I think, you know, Roblox has been spectacularly successful through a combination of automation and human beings. So there's thousands of human moderators. And this is very similar to how anti-cheating works in a lot of other video games, where the idea is, and it comes back to that force multiplier phrase you use, is there a way that we can use automation, which originally was based on keywords, and now we're using machine learning, in order to quickly focus the human beings, so that, you know, we still want humans making these decisions, we want humans applying the value judgment, but can we do it in a way where we use their time effectively, so that cases where they shouldn't be bothered because it's obviously good or obviously bad, we can have an AI handle that. And I think that's someplace that we've just had unbelievable, sort of, you know, unreasonable is the word that comes up, success in terms of deploying technology. And I think as we move forward, it becomes even more important, because with the user content creation, everything we're doing is trying to accelerate the user content creation. And so that accelerates both the good and bad actors. And there's a small number of bad actors, but we're finding that, you know, in many cases, I think this is exactly the right problem for AI to say, hey, let me flag this one and delay you for an hour before that goes live, so a human can look at it, versus being able to say, oh yeah, we can automate approval of this. It's clear that what you've done is good. And where I see this becoming really interesting is, so I would say the techniques for interactive, you know, whether it's games or more of a social metaverse like Roblox, they're the same as offline production in the VFX industry, especially now we're doing virtual production. Everything is real time. The difference is that in interactive context, we don't necessarily have a script up front, and we don't have post and editing on the back end. And so the moderation has to be real time. You know, this sort of, no one's going to give us a rating after we've cut the film, right? We're getting rated in real time. And so that's a case where it's really interesting to deploy AI. And it's about, as we're moving to voice chat now, which is in multiple languages, but you have to understand nuance, you have to understand sarcasm and context, tone, and this is very different across each of the cultural contexts in which, you know, we're a global platform. So we have plenty of users in China, we have users in India, and you don't want to apply Northern California either laws or morals or cultural context in another place and vice versa. But what do you do when those people are playing together, right? So we need to find ways to bring the world together, but civilly. And it has to go across voice, it has to go across facial expression and gesture, larger scale actions. What are you doing in the game? And then the content itself. So when someone creates a new t-shirt or a new experience or a new vehicle, how do we decide, is this an offensive vehicle in some way? And these are very tricky questions. And it's really coming down to AI is exactly that force multiplier we needed. There's no way for hundreds of millions, looking forward to billions of players, that we could possibly, we would have to have half the world's population moderating the other half. And so we're really looking to AI to solve this. And so far, there'll be lots to talk about in sort of the coming months and years. But so far, everything is looking extraordinarily positive, more optimistic than I would have expected, even based on my decade of research in this area.
That's amazing, and I'm just personally really delighted at this idea that expectations around artists, directors, children, and just regular people building content, and parents and society, all of those expectations kind of needing to be aligned and being fed with how this new technology is developed. It's really great that we're all working with all of those considerations in mind. And I also sense just a huge amount of optimism and positivity. But I think that's also kind of tempered by really understanding the application and how to cross-pollinate the technology with the right people, the right techniques, and the right mindset. This has been really great. This has been such an excellent panel. And when I do these things, I always feel like I wish, first of all, that this was done in a casual setting where we could all be having a drink and just talking more informally, as opposed to taking turns over Zoom. I guess this is the next best thing. But it's just such a delight to hear everything that's on everyone's minds. I also want to give a huge thank you to the Symposium and everybody who helped organize this, for creating this opportunity. So thank you very much, everyone, for contributing to this in your way, and giving the opportunity to talk about this this technology and this trend that's really changing the way we work and changing the way we express art. So with that, my cherished panelists, a great thank you, and look forward to seeing how we all innovate in this area respectively in the future.
Thank you, Mathieu, very much. Congratulations, Paul, by the way.
Thank you.